Hello and welcome to Face to Face. Our guest today is Saanich Councillor and CRD Director Vic Derman. Vic's been on Saanich Council for a number of years. I don't know how many, but I'll ask him in a minute. But mostly we're going to be talking about CRD issues. And we're going to start by talking about sewage treatment, which is an issue that Vic's been involved in. So Vic, question number one, how long have you been on Saanich Council now?
I'm in my 7th year, Jack.
Okay. Sewage treatment. Let's start with the question, do we need it?
That's a really difficult question. As you're probably aware, we are in the process of planning sewage treatment because the Minister of the Environment reacted to some information about potentially contaminated sites in the outfalls and mandated that we undergo a process of sewage treatment. At some point, obviously, we do. You won't be able to continue dumping things into the ocean forever.
Well, it sounds almost as if you think maybe we don't really need it.
No, I'm a supporter of sewage treatment. It's simply a process of how we go about it and how we incorporate this into something we might talk about a little later, and that's a kind of a vision of sustainability for the entire region.
Okay. Just on the issue of do we need it or not, I was involved in the issue 10 or 15 years ago, and I remember getting a few reports from the federal government science, and they were saying there were large dead zones around the outfalls and, fish with lesions and everything else.
No, not really very much. Is there some environmental damage around the outfalls? Yes, there is. Anytime you pump a lot of any kind of material into the ocean, you're going to change the conditions around where you do that. But most of what we pump in is water, and in that water is nutrients. There are some heavy metals and some other emergent chemicals that are of concern. Is the damage sufficient right now that you would want to spend $1 to $2 billion to handle that? That's a question that really needs to be considered. Actually, the quality of the environment around the outfalls in the last 10 years has been slowly improving. And the reason it has is because we have had a very good and very successful, and I think something we should be really trumpeting, a source control program where we've been getting people to stop putting things into the sewage that shouldn't be there to start with.
For example?
For example, all the dentists now have traps to make sure that they capture the amalgams, gold, so on and so forth. All the places that change oil for you are required to make sure that oil just doesn't get dumped down the drain. Most of the restaurants have to have grease traps. A whole variety of things like that we've done is very, very good.
Sounds
now,
great.
I really want to mention that homeowners too, when you put something down the drain, it doesn't disappear. It's still there, and unfortunately it's into our sewage system and ultimately into where that sewage system empties. So don't put your old pharmaceuticals down the toilet when you're finished with them. Properly dispose of them, and there are avenues available. Because
how do you get rid of pharmaceuticals?
I'll just phone up CRD and they'll tell you where you can take those kinds of things. And we have provisions for virtually everything. Don't take beauty care products, and pump them into the sink and let them and get rid of them that way. All these things have chemicals in them that potentially have some damaging effects if they're in sufficient concentrations. And the more you do that, the more difficult it becomes. Even if you decide to treat sewage, the more difficult it becomes to handle those kinds of things. The best way to handle them is not put them in there to start with.
Yeah, that's a very important message, actually.
Absolutely,
we don't get that often.
Absolutely. And our program, source control program, I couldn't congratulate our staff enough for it. It's been a remarkable success. It really has.
Now, when you say source control, you're talking CRD-wide.
Yeah, CRD-wide. It's a CRD program.
Excellent.
And it's a very, very good program, and one that I hope we continue to expand.
Well, the one place where it doesn't, you said that dentists are doing something, restaurants are doing something, places that change your oil are doing something, but as a householder or as somebody, just a resident, I never see that message. Be careful about what you're throwing down the sink and toilet.
We do put it out, but I think we ought to put it out more.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think there's a belief that you can tell people something once and that's enough. No, you and I are the same. You know, sometimes you have to drip on our forehead for a while.
Well, McDonald's knows that.
Yeah, of course. And eventually you recognize that you're being dripped on the forehead. No, we need to keep getting the message out and out to, you know, that you can do a lot for the environment, do a lot for us even financially by making sure that you don't put things into the waste stream that shouldn't be there to start with.
Yeah. What's the number offhand, if you know it, for the CRD? You said people can phone up if they have pharmaceuticals, and they can be taken
Well, the
care
general information number for the CRD is 250-360-3000.
Okay, 360-3000.
Yeah.
So folks, write that down, 360-3000, or look it up in the phone book. It's easy enough to find. Or Google, you know, CRD.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And think about that, because I've read a lot recently about pharmaceuticals and many other things as well, but especially pharmaceuticals going into water. It's not a good situation.
Yeah, there hasn't been enough research done on some of these things, but some of them are hormone imitators, you know, and have the potential to disrupt normal hormone functions in the body or alter them. And we don't know at what concentration, and we don't have all the information yet, but it's pretty sure that it's not a good thing to be doing.
Yeah. And you and I will have to disagree on whether or not we need sewage, because I think we do, although...
I'm not saying we don't. I think we should move to treat our sewage. Let me make that absolutely clear, that I'm supportive of moving to treat our sewage. It's the manner in which we do it and the program we incorporate it into.
Okay. Let's talk about the process to date.
Okay, sure. Now, and it's probably no secret to a lot of your viewers that for almost 2 years now, I've been raising a lot of concerns about the process and about what we've been doing. The problem is that we never did our due diligence at the start. You know, we're looking at a program of spending $1 to $2 billion of taxpayers' money. That is huge. We have never undertaken an expenditure in that time frame in this region, really, or anything even close. I'll give you an example. Everybody knows about the CREST system and concerned about, you know, what happened there. And
well, everybody doesn't know. So.
Well, it's the radio communication system, and it
for
didn't...
our police.
Exactly, and it didn't work properly when it put in, and people were very concerned, was this a waste of public money? That was about an $18 to $25 million project. So in the sewage treatment, we're looking at anywhere from, you know, in the range of 50 to 100 times more expensive. It's huge. So if you're going to spend that kind of money, if it was me, I would start out by saying, okay, I want to make absolutely sure that if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it the best way possible. I'm going to do it at the least possible cost to taxpayers, and I'm going to do it to get the greatest possible environmental benefit that I can. Absolutely.
Let's just repeat that. Least cost to taxpayers.
Least cost to taxpayers.
And citizens. I prefer to use the word citizens.
Citizens,
okay.
Let's say citizens.
And the best system.
The best environmental outcome that I can get.
Okay.
Because
I thought that's what we were doing.
I would argue no, not necessarily. I can't say for sure. But to do that, I would then start to say, okay, I'm going to start this with an open process. I'm going to basically open it up to the whole corporate world and others to say, let's have a design competition. Let's ask for the best and brightest around the world to come up with the idea of how we can best accomplish this. We really didn't do that, unfortunately. We started with the assumption that we would use our existing collection system that the CRD operates, which is built up for years, and we would use it and its endpoints at Clover and Macaulay Point. And essentially we would use it to build a couple of large treatment plants at one or both of those endpoints. Now it turned out that with Clover, you don't have enough room to build a treatment plant unless you buried it underground, and that's huge expense and would essentially destroy the point for recreational purposes as it exists now. So it really became the potential of Macaulay Point of being the site for a large plant. And that was the assumption that was made, that that's the way you would do it, without ever opening it up to see if there were other possibilities.
That doesn't seem like the right way to be doing it. I had thought, really, that it was opened up to the best ideas.
Well, actually, interestingly enough, early in the process, I thought so too. And we had what is called a request for expressions of interest, which is supposed to allow anybody to put forward ideas about how we might go about this. But it turned out that that was limited to technology only, and essentially to technology that would fit in to the essential system design, or we could call it the system architecture that they had chosen. So there was no opportunity for people to say, look, there's other designs that might work better, that might be cheaper, that might give you a better end result. Those just could never be brought forward, essentially, unfortunately.
Who made this decision to...
Well, ultimately, I guess in the end, the committee did, the Quarry Liquid Waste Management Committee, but I think, I understand the rationale why. It was fundamentally, I think, some staff moving in that direction, and eventually, I guess the committee supported it. And it's understandable why, because we have been developing the existing system for a very long period of time, and it has been aimed at those two endpoints, at Clover and Macaulay Point, where we have our two major outfalls. And of course, there is a momentum, there is an inertia that goes along with that. Gee, we've spent an awful lot of money on this existing system. Can we abandon it? Well,
but that's the question that you want to be asking. And that's the question that sounded like didn't have a chance. Because if you do ask the question and it turns out that yes, it does make more sense to do something else, then it makes more sense.
Absolutely. And on the other hand, if you did ask the question and it turned out at the end to say, no, the way we're going is the right way to go, the best way to go, then fine, you swallow the medicine and you do it. Fundamentally. But we never, ever did that, unfortunately. Now, as a consequence, what's happened is we've wound up with 3 proposals in front of us. Very expensive systems built on the existing infrastructure that we have, essentially a big plant at the end of it. The first option is to have one big plant in the Macaulay or McLaughlin Point area, whichever site becomes available.
Okay, so that's option number 1 is one.
No, it actually has one major plant and then 4 smaller plants. One up in the UVic area, for example, a couple out in Colwood and so forth. Okay. Now, we need those for a couple of reasons. Hopefully, they're going to involve some resource recovery. But also, we have a problem of overflows in our system. We have a lot of what is called infill and infiltration, which means a lot of stormwater. Our system is old in some places, and it leaks. So we have a lot of stormwater and rainwater flowing into it.
So it's not that it leaks out, it's also that it leaks in.
Absolutely. Actually, it doesn't leak out because it's more or less the pressure, et cetera, and movement pulls things in. But it does leak in.
So what that means is when it rains,
the load on the system goes way, way up.
Because water is simply leaking into our sewer pipes.
In sewer pipes, and sometimes it's faulty connections on homeowners' property. Probably 60% of the infill and infiltration actually takes place on private property. But it's an issue. And now what it means is that we have overflows. Under provincial legislation, we're supposed to have no more than one overflow in 5 years.
What does an overflow mean?
Well, it means that the system simply has more volume in it than the pipes can handle. And so it has to be diverted somewhere else. Now, in the present case, for example, some of it exits out in the storm drains near Willows Beach.
Well, that's why Willows Beach gets polluted every once in a while.
Or could, yeah, in the wintertime, of course, not in the summer. But the only thing we do is try to screen it so that we don't get Mr. Floaty appearing and things of that nature. And that's helpful. And it is very dilute because there's a huge amount of water in it. But we're not compliant with provincial legislation. We have years when we have 30 overflows, and things like that. So the system has to handle that as well. Now, so the first option is the one big plant and 4 smaller plants. Okay. And then the other options are for one big plant and 7 smaller plants, and for one big plant and 10 or 11 smaller plants.
Oh, okay.
I look at it like you were going to buy a car, and instead of researching the market, you went out and said, hey, I'm going to buy a Pontiac.
Yes.
I've already made up my mind.
Right now, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, right. I didn't choose that just by accident. But, okay, now it's whether I'm going to buy Pontiac A, Pontiac B, or Pontiac C. In reality, you might want to look around and say, do I want to buy a Pontiac, or do I want to buy a Chev, or do I want to buy a Volkswagen or a Honda or a Toyota, or whatever it might be? You would do your research.
Well, this sounds like a very serious situation, folks, because, I'm somebody who's interested in this issue, and, I've tried to follow it. I've attended a few open houses, and to tell you the truth, what Vic is saying right now, I didn't know. I didn't know that we had started off by not taking a pretty good look at all the options. Why? It just seems on the face of it to make no sense to start off without looking at all the options.
Well, I guess it makes some sense, and it's in the terms of people looking and saying, well, you have this existing investment that you have made, and we'll build on top of that.
Yeah, but
that's
does it cost something to look at other options?
Well, it would, but it would cost a very small fraction of what you're going to spend, on this system. And of course, the existing way is money spent in the past, and it has served quite well. It may be the best way to go in the future, but it may not be.
May not be. Now, what's your take on things? What kind of a system would you like to see?
Well, I don't know. That's a real problem, because here I am, having been in this process for 2 years, and if somebody asks me, are we going the best way? My answer is, I don't know, because I have no basis for comparison. I suspect that we might be able to go to a different architecture involving smaller plants designed around the principle that you would recover resources and treat sewage not as a waste, but as a source of potential resources, and to be used that way. But I don't know if that's better or not, because essentially we haven't done sufficient research. We have looked at resource recovery, but we've only looked at it putting it on top of what we've already decided to do. Of course, once you do that, obviously resource recovery becomes more expensive. You have a system designed on the existing way of doing things, and now you're going to stick some resource recovery on top of it. Yeah, that costs more. Would a system that was designed around those principles be more expensive? Maybe not. And very likely, it would provide greater environmental benefit.
If you were going to, let's say, from what you do know,
Mm-hmm.
You've been involved for a couple of years.
Yep. More than I would like, almost.
More than you would like, yeah. What kind of system could we have that might come in at a lower cost and do a better job? What is an alternative system?
Well, there are, one possibility. Well, there are a number of possibilities. One is that you would, how rapidly are you going to do the whole thing? I agree with you. I think we need to move to sewage treatment. Do we need to, is there an emergency out in the street? Probably not. So it might make sense to say, look, we can move towards this over a period of 15 or 20 years rather than 5 to 8 years or something of that nature, and design a system that takes advantage of new technologies, takes advantage of new development, to get the new development to pay for it instead of existing taxpayers to pay for it. There are lots of possibilities, but that's what a proper design competition would let us know. If we did that and said, okay, the best and the brightest out there, what would you propose for our system? I've got some ideas, but I have no solid research to back them up. One of my concerns now is we're spending potentially a huge amount of money. What's the cost-benefit analysis out of that? How much environmental benefit are we going to get from it? And I've asked recently at the committee level I asked actually our peer review panel and said, has there been an analysis of the net environmental benefit of what you're proposing? In other words, the benefit to the marine environment as opposed to whatever happens in the land environment and whatever happens to the airshed. And the answer was, no, that hasn't happened. Well, why? Why? Because if we go the way that has been proposed, this is a huge hit in the region. The average taxpayer in Saanich by 2016 would see their taxes go up somewhere between $500 and $700 a year just for that project alone. Now, this year, we had a tough year economically, and we had to suffer through a 4% increase in taxes in Saanich. That equated to about $77 for the average Saanich home. And we would like to keep it lower than that. We're talking about in 2016, an increase of perhaps $700 a year for the average Saanich home. That's immense.
And that's for a system that costs how much?
$1.2 billion.
With the province kicking in $400 million.
Yep.
The federal government kicking in $400 million.
If they kick in, yeah.
Yeah, well, let's assume they do. So the $400 million
is
for this region would entail $700 a year per homeowner?
Well, $500 to $700. I mean, depending
in Saanich.
Yeah, in Saanich. In some places it would be less. In some places like Oak Bay, it would be higher on average. Say Oak Bay could be in the range of $1,000, $1,200 a year.
Now, a sewage treatment plant was recently built in the central Saanich area, I think.
Yeah, a few years back.
Yeah. I know people who are on it, and they're getting secondary sewage treatment. Mm-hmm. Not maybe that far different from what is sort of being planned for the whole CRD. And they're paying $10 per household per month or less. Now, after I was told that number, I actually phoned up the CRD and asked them, and I got exactly pretty close to that figure, maybe a bit less. So if people who are on it now are paying less than $10 per household per month, why is a new system, where are the costs? Why is this thing being taken in at $1.2 billion? Because I've looked into the cost number.
There are a lot of costs because there's a lot of major engineering involved.
But a system
for example,
that's costing $10 per month.
Yeah, but it's the old apples and oranges thing. For example, we can't use clover for a plant unless we're going to bury the plant at an inordinate amount of money. So you have to take all the sewage that's coming from Clover right now to Clover from the east side of the region, and you have to get it over to Macaulay. And that's probably a big pipeline across the front of the harbor. That's not cheap. A plant of the capacity we need, even if we're looking at the capacity we need to about 2025 or 2030, is in the range of $500 million. Now, you've got all the other ancillary costs, and you're going to need some of the satellite plants, because one single plant would do absolutely nothing about the issue of overflows and things of that nature. Is the $1.2 billion accurate? Well, it's hard to say. It's a best estimate at this time. It's probably in the ballpark. Now, for a politician, I want to really stress what that means. I face, or whoever's going to be there in 2016, I'm probably, by that time the voters will probably get tired of me, or maybe I'll get tired of what I'm doing, who knows. But that's a ways away, and there's a good possibility I will no longer be directly involved. But whoever is at that time, they're going to face issues of transportation in the region, of healthcare, of affordable housing, of homelessness, of green space requirements, all the issues we face today, and possibly more. Where's the money going to come from? If you're hitting people with a $700 a year increase just for the sewage treatment project, you're blowing the whole wad. There is a limit on what the taxpayer is going to pay. And if I have things I want to do in Saanich, and I'm already hitting you that year with a $700 bill, how much more can I place on you? Probably not very much. So, if I was convinced that this was the best way and we needed essentially to do it right now in the way it's been proposed, I guess I would have to bite the bullet and do it. But I would have, even then, huge reservations, because I know that so many essential things in the region, we just wouldn't have the resources to do them.
I just ran through some quick numbers here, and it looks to me as if saying $600 to $700 per household is to me, it just as a quick look, it looks on the high end of things. I don't know where that $700 number comes from, but I would say a couple $100 less.
In the range of $500 to $700. That's what's being put forward to us from the financial people at the CRD. They are very competent people.
Well, let's go
they
into
really
that
are.
because I had with CRD staff at an open house more than a year ago. I went in and I looked at their cost numbers, the $1.2 billion number that's been bandied about so much over the last few years. Within 5 minutes, I said to the person I was talking to, who was very high up, a senior CRD person, I said, you're over on your estimate here by $200 million. Within 2 minutes, he had agreed with me. He said, yes, you're right. They said they would put out a press release to the media so that the media would stop using the $1.2 million number, $1.2 billion number. That was never done. I contacted the media myself, and the media has never stopped using that $1.2 billion. I'm just saying that in a conversation with a senior CRD staff person, they admitted, because what they had done basically was counted inflation twice in their $1.2 billion figure. So I'm just saying, if I, who know nothing, can take a look at their numbers and in literally 5 minutes they agree with me that it's over by $200 million, and that never changes in the number that's put out to the public. They're still using that $1.2 billion, even though they admitted it was wrong. And I've spoken to people who have looked into the cost estimates here, and they say there is just one thing after another that is used to bump the price up. And for example, one thing they assume, I don't know if you know this or not, is that each user of water and sewage in the year, and basically it's using water that creates the sewage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody in the year 2060, I think, is the number they're looking at, because that's what we're building this plant to capacity for. 2060, 2050?
Ultimately, yes, with
and they're saying each resident of the CRD is going to be using as much water at that time as they're using today. And I think you'd agree with me that that is impossible.
And that's probably...
And when they say that, it means everything has to be built bigger.
Yeah, and by the way, that they're not quite assuming that, but there is a factor in terms of planning, and I would agree that, first of all, I wouldn't say necessarily about the $200 million difference. In any project of this kind of size, you put in a substantial contingency.
And they've got that as well.
You absolutely have to.
But that's separate.
I looked over the numbers fairly carefully. Within standard construction practices, they're fairly accurate. Very few projects, Brightwater in Seattle, a major sewage treatment project, almost doubled the price from the actual estimate. We have the example of the Trade and Convention Center in Vancouver, virtually double the original estimate. There have been others around the province, Hospital in Abbotsford, and on and so forth. There haven't been many that come in under. Now, again, that is for the existing design, for what is proposed, and it involves operating costs of $20 million a year or more additional above what we're actually doing now. I think it's probably reasonably accurate, although I'm not a financial expert.
Well, I think within 2 minutes they agreed with me that they had put in an extra $200 million into their $1.2 billion figure. I mean, $200 million is a huge amount of money, and they admitted it, but it's never changed. They have never given another number to the public.
Well, you and I will have to differ a bit on that one, because it's people like major accounting firms and so forth, and have taken a look at it and said, appears reasonable. But what that doesn't say is this: do we really need to spend that much to do what we want to do?
Well, let's go into that.
And already we've had some major firms, private firms, sniffing around, and who have approached some local politicians and said, we think we can do this much cheaper. Now, I haven't had any kind of formal proposal in front of me, but certainly I've had individuals, other politicians in town, say to me that they had been approached by major corporate firms who have indicated that they think there is a way to do it much cheaper. All this comes right back to where we were before. What do we compare it against? There absolutely is nothing to compare it against, because we've made an assumption of how we would do it to start with, and we've gone down that road continuously. Now, if it's the wrong road, we're getting further and further down to it. is the estimate accurate? I think it probably is, but even if it was out by $100 or $200 million, it's still a huge hit on the taxpayer for limited, possibly limited environmental benefit. Would you get a better environmental benefit by spending $500 million in LRT? You may well do. That's the way.
Would we get a better environmental benefit by putting a $500 million tax on the oil companies and the banks in this province, and spending that money on sewage treatment and LRT? I mean, let's look at the range of options.
That's a different policy option. Not something that I'm in a position to deal with.
But let's go back to what you said 2 minutes ago. You said major corporate players, I guess, who have some experience in building sewage treatment, have come forward and said they can do this cheaper.
That's secondhand knowledge to me.
Okay.
But there have been some political figures in town who have said to me, look, I've been approached by somebody and they think that there is a cheaper way to do this. Now, I'm not interested in the cheapest way that provides no environmental benefit. We're mandated to do this for reasons of environmental benefit. Now, that's why, by the way, why I brought up saying, look, I want an analysis that says what benefit we get out of this. Because the reason we're doing it is supposedly because there was an environmental problem. Okay, what benefits are we going to get? Will we get some benefits from marine environment? Yes, we will. Will we get benefits on the land environment? Will we get benefits in the airshed? Or will I create additional problems? I need to know that. And when I'm spending your money and every other citizens of the region, I need to know that you're getting value for the money I'm spending. And if you're not, then I want to do it differently. LRT could be a huge environmental benefit to this region.
Absolutely.
Very huge.
Yeah.
If we are saying we won't be able to do LRT because we're going to treat sewage, that's something I have to consider very, very carefully.
I think that is a phony argument put out by the provincial government and people at that level, because they keep bringing in one tax cut after another, especially corporate tax cuts at the federal level and the provincial level. The money is out there to give us LRT. It's always been there.
Well,
I don't agree with that. Can we have LRT or can we have sewage treatment? We can have both.
Well,
maybe we won't have as much corporate
you may or may
profit
not be. You may or may not be able to have both. But I have to operate. I have to operate in an environment of dealing with senior levels of government that will make so much money available to me, and it's not unlimited.
No.
And and they will also make money available to every other town and city in the country and region. And
take for example the new roof that's being put on BC Place by Premier Campbell, $300 million, and that again is not counting overruns. And also, that's being funded completely by the province.
Well,
there's no talk of the city having to pay a penny for it.
Well, and one can argue whether that's good or bad.
But I'm just raising the issues.
I have no control of that.
No, you don't.
So if I'm in the position of them saying, there's a limited amount of resources that are going to be available to you.
Yeah.
I have to make absolutely sure that those resources are being spent in the best possible way
and we
for
should
the people
absolutely
in this
do
region.
that. But the resources are there for both.
Yeah, maybe. In my case, here's what I'm being given. Yeah. Let's make darn sure that we're getting value for the money.
We seem to be going in a circle. Can we get to the point where, is there a better, less expensive way of doing this? You're just saying we don't know.
Yeah, well, the way to find out, obviously, is to open up the process.
So should we be doing that? Is that what this is all about?
Of course we should.
Okay.
And actually last July, I brought to the committee a motion to say, let's have a new request for expressions of interest, where anybody out there can indicate how they would go about doing this, and how much it would cost us, and what benefits we would get from it. And at the same time, we could be going along the direction we're going. The two things could run in parallel. And if you found out the new request provided you with a better alternative, then you would go in that direction. It almost passed the committee. There's 14 people on the committee. There were 13 at the time. It was kind of like a 7-6 vote or something of that nature. It was very close, but the committee turned it down. I think we still need something of that kind of process, so that I can be very sure that we are going in the right direction. It is the lowest cost to citizens. It is providing the greatest possible environmental benefit. we're getting that combination. I don't know that now.
Yeah, I mean, what Vic is saying seems to make absolute sense. And I'm not surprised at all that the committee voted it down, because I've seen the way city politics works in this city. But what Vic is saying is that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, you can correct me in a minute, but what he's saying is that we should throw open the process right now to everybody who can, seriously put forward some ideas and see if we're doing the right thing. And that, to me, that makes fundamental sense.
Absolutely.
And if we're not doing that, then, as you say, every day we're moving down a road which may be taking us in the wrong direction.
We're moving farther and farther down the road, and the farther you move down the road, the harder it is to backtrack. And of course, the more you've invested in the process of getting down that road. Actually, in terms of the sewage treatment project, I think I would go much further than where we're going talking about the project itself, because I think there's a great failing in that we are really looking at this project in isolation from the other issues that we face in the region and, in fact, on the planet. We have a huge, huge challenge facing us. It's called climate change. And it really means that we're going to have to change the way we do things, everything. And we're going to have to move much, much more towards a sustainability approach. Now, we have a perfect opportunity at the CRD right now. We are redoing our strategic plan. It's at the draft stage. It's moving much more towards a sustainable region approach. We are at the 5-year review of the regional growth strategy. It looks like it's going to become much more of a regional sustainability document. We have the Solid Waste Advisory Committee at the CRD saying, we want to get out of the landfill business. We don't want to take waste and just bury it. We want to make use of it as a resource. And we'd like to close Heartland down, essentially, in the not too far distant future.
To the point, because we don't need it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And or at least minimize what's happening there. We have a situation right now where we have the perfect opportunity to create a regional vision of sustainability for what this region is going to be like 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, and how we're going to turn it into a region that works locally and addresses global issues. Out of that, part of it should be, let's take all the waste streams, solid waste, organic waste, liquid waste, and treat them in an integrated manner, design them around resource recovery, and then the sewage treatment project becomes part of that. And we say, given this goal, what time frame do we want to do it in? And how do we want to approach it so that it fits into that sustainability vision? It's a huge opportunity for the region, absolutely huge. And if we insist on looking at each problem by itself as a separate component, we're going to blow that opportunity.
Are there places in the world that are doing this? And now you're talking about solid waste, which is our garbage.
Yep.
Liquid waste, which is our sewage.
And organic
waste, which is everything coming out of our gardens and yards.
Exactly.
And the food waste.
Yeah,
those three things.
Yeah.
And as you said earlier, and I've heard other people say this, this is not waste. This is not garbage. This is a resource.
Yeah.
And nature doesn't have garbage and waste. Nature has a never-ending circle of use,
Exactly.
and that's where we have to go.
We absolutely do. And I was fortunate enough to have a presentation about a month ago from Linköping in Sweden. The mayor was in town and the city administrator.
Is Linköping a city?
It's a city of about 150,000 people.
In Sweden.
So it's about half our size, roughly. They got concerned in the 1980s when the first big oil crisis hit, early 80s, and they decided they would sit down and have a sustainable Linköping vision of what it would become. Now, they have worked at that for close to 30 years now. And for example, greenhouse gases. Ours are steadily going up. We have a federal goal that says we'll be 20% below 2006 levels by 2020, which is a very minimal goal. Linköping right now is 55% below 1990 levels in their greenhouse gases.
They're 50%.
55%
below 1990 levels. And we are probably 35 to 40% above 1990 levels.
Yes, we are. This region's a little bit better because we had enough vision, and I'm happy to say I was part of it, to put in a methane collection system at the Heartland landfill. a number of years back. And that has helped us look better than some of the rest of the country. But yeah, basically we're about 30%.
So things can be done, and obviously they are being done.
Absolutely, they can be done. And they're making money at it. You know,
they're making money at it.
You know, I mean, it's not an incredible revenue, but it's not costing them a fortune either. Let me give you.
When you talk about operating costs, there are operating costs, but the revenue covers operating costs.
Exactly. Now, not in every part of their system.
Okay.
In actual truth, their sewage treatment up till now has been a net cost. They're hoping that they can get that into a pay for itself or a slight profit in the near future. They operate it as a business. They set it up that way. Let me give you
city-owned?
City-owned private or city-owned utility.
Okay.
If you want to put it that way. So the manager is hired as if he is running a company.
Right.
You know, and he's expected to make a profit.
Right. For the city.
Exactly. Yeah. Now let me give you another stat. Worldwide, the average amount of solid waste going into landfills is around 83-84%.
Wait, the average amount of solid waste going into landfills
just treated as waste and thrown into landfills is about 83 or 84% of solid waste. That's the figure.
So of all the solid waste you have,
about
83% goes into your landfill.
Absolutely.
And 17% is recycled.
Yeah, exactly. In Canada, it's more typically in the range of 40 to 60%.
Okay.
The average for the entire country of Sweden is 4%.
4%.
4% goes into landfills.
So everything else is
utilized. Now,
and they even make money from it.
Yes, overall. Now, some of it is older technology. You know, some of it is incinerated, and you generate power in the process of incineration.
I don't like the incineration option.
It's
disastrous.
But that's technology is changing there.
I don't believe it.
There are, well, not incineration itself,
yeah,
but there's high temperature pyrolysis, which is essentially not an incineration process. There is a plasma arc technology that uses, well, plasma arc operates at 30,000 degrees centigrade. It doesn't burn material. It rips it apart molecularly. And you fundamentally get some syngas, you get heat, you get some water, and you get a small residue that is essentially inert and can be used to construct roadbeds or things of that nature. So, I mean, there's a lot of potential to do that.
Yeah.
You know, there really is. And we need.
And I guess what we also really need to be doing is stop creating all these poisons and excesses that we then have to deal with. We just should be using from the get-go cleaner, safer products that are not poisonous to the environment.
Absolutely. I mean, and for example, packaging. Now, I've noticed recently that Thrifty Foods has indicated they will eliminate plastic bags. Great. Good on them. We are so overpackaged. It's crazy. That goes into the waste stream. The very first part of any sustainability plan is 3 R's. Reduce, reuse, recycle. What you do from then is to say, what isn't handled by that? What used to be called waste, we have to find ways of using that beneficially. You know, to create heat for heating buildings, to create fuels for our vehicles. In Linköping, most of the bus fleet is run by fuels that are produced from the waste stream.
Okay, so in Linköping, Sweden,
yeah,
most of the fuel, or all of the fuel for their bus fleet,
is produced from what used to be called waste material.
Right. So organic waste is composted and gas comes out of it, which is captured.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Sewage as well.
Yeah, exactly. Biodigesters.
We've got to be doing this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know.
And why aren't we doing it?
We are doing some of it. I mean, I'm not saying in our region we haven't made progress, and we have. I think we're going to have to make progress a lot faster because of the problems we face. Let's take the area of water reuse or water use. I'm on the Water Commission. I'm the vice chair of it. I really congratulate our staff with the conservation programs. Our population has grown somewhere in the range of 10 to 20% in the last 10 or 15 years. We are using less water in total today than we were 10 years ago. That's a very singular accomplishment.
We're still among the greatest wasters in the world.
Yes, we are, but it's been
For sure.
I mean, we've had a lot of new people move in, and we're using less water than we did then.
And that goes back to the sewage point I made earlier.
Yep.
They assumed in designing these plants that everybody was going to be using the same amount of water per person in 2060 as they are today. We can see that that's not happening because our population is growing and we're using less water.
And that's just one of the reasons, Jack, why I suspect you might not want to build a real big plant now.
Yes,
because
exactly.
if you do, you're potentially built to make it economic. You're either going to build the capacity you need for 50 years, or you're going to put in essentially the rough boxes that provide for that capacity. That doesn't take into account changes and innovations that are going to come along. And 50 years from now, I mean, it's possible that every house could have a refrigerator-sized unit in it that takes care of all the sewage. Now, that's pie in the sky, but
well, maybe not.
Who knows?
Maybe not. There's no reason. Let's move on to transportation for a minute, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What's your vision for transportation in this city over the next 10, 20, 30 years?
Well, it absolutely has to change. Anybody who lives in this town knows that moving around now is a lot more difficult than it was 10 or 20 years ago. We have a lot more congestion. Well, our own CRD modeling software says that if we don't change fairly dramatically how people move around, we face as much as a 300% increase in congestion within 15 to 20 years. That's unacceptable. I mean, you sit out there now at 4:30 in the afternoon and probably say some not so nice things under your breath because you're stuck in this very slow-moving traffic. Think of it 3 times as bad. You know, we can't do that.
So what are the steps, the directions to go?
It really, again, comes from a regional sustainability plan, because a lot of what you need for transportation comes from how you design your cities. If you create compact, denser neighborhoods with lots of internal opportunities to buy things, to work, for recreation, for cultural activities, for services, where people don't have to drive to them, then you cut down the requirement for transportation right there. So we need to look at those kinds of things. When it comes to the fact that, yes, people are going to move to one area to another, it has to be dedicated right-of-way transit. You need something like LRT.
So when you say dedicated right-of-way transit, you mean light rail?
Well, some people would say busways, but it has to be on its own track or pathway that it doesn't get caught in the rest of traffic. And we have to make it attractive, convenient, safe, and fast. You know, it has to be competitive. It has to be a reason for somebody to say, why would I take my car? You know, it's a lot better to get on this.
And I want to say that the people who are running the bus system are failing very, very badly in that, because it is not pleasant to go on the buses these days. It's not overcrowded and noisy so much, but you know, they allow radios on, and there's always radio. You know, you can always hear somebody else's music coming out. Who wants to listen to that? They should just make a rule that you can't do it on the bus and have security around to enforce it, and make the buses more pleasant for everybody.
The people running the bus system face a lot of problems, one of them being underfunding.
I'll just cut in here and say, remember folks, the underfunding is deliberate. What we're doing is we're reducing taxes on upper income earners and corporations. In the States now, I've read a couple of times about this, they are talking about raising marginal rates on high income earners, so that after your income is $400,000 or $500,000 a year or $300,000 a year, you start to pay higher taxes on that. They've done it in New York State. And the article I got said that's how they've managed to avoid going into deficit, or I don't know if they are in deficit, but they've collected extra billions of dollars. Now, we should be doing that across Canada. We do not. There is money for buses. What we're having is too much money going to the investor and corporate class.
Well,
and I know that's got nothing to do with
I'm
you.
going to get back, but just in terms of, we're not funding transit adequately at the present time. So my daughter uses transit. I ride my bike mostly, so I'm not on transit that often. But I mean, if you're a UVic student and you sit at the stop while 3 different buses go past you and they're all full, and you don't get to your class in time, you're not going to use the bus.
That's right.
It's not reliable enough, and so that has to change. But in the end, I think the people at Transit, I think they have very good staff. I honestly think they're doing a very good job with the resources they have available. They don't have enough resources available. And in the end, if the bus is stuck in traffic, it's stuck in traffic. If we're going to get people to get out of their cars, we're going to have to say there's a very good reason to do that. You get there faster, going on the other transit, it's attractive, it's safe, it's comfortable, it's all those good things. And we have to do that.
Let's just say 1 minute's worth about the ENN. I mean, we have a rail line that runs up and down the island, and it's used in the most inefficient way possible. I don't think they could do any worse.
There is an ENN committee, or committee who got control of the island corridor, it is now called, a foundation. They have brought some very good planning. They have got a cost to indicate that to return the rail bed to functionality, because there's a lot of deferred maintenance on that rail bed, for the entire island would cost about $112 million.
Peanuts.
Absolute peanuts compared to what the benefit could be. And I'm very hopeful that in its current mandate, the provincial government will choose to fund that. And you could put in a commuter service from Langford to Victoria, not as extensive initially as you would like, but you could start it for in the range of $12 to $16 million. That, even a busway out to Langford would be probably in the range of $130, $140 million.
No, it's ridiculous when you got the rail line right there.
We should be making use of it. Yeah, absolutely.
And these aren't, to me, these aren't accidents. This is deliberate policy because our country is run by the automobile companies, even as they go bankrupt.
I won't go there, Jack,
no, I know.
But I would certainly agree with you as to the fact that we need to make use of that resource. And absolutely, we're going to have to change the way we do things for the world of tomorrow.
We're out of time. Vic, thank you very much for coming on. We've been talking to Saanich Councillor Vic Derman. I think the main point we talked a lot about sewage treatment. I think the main point that Vic is trying to make or has made is that we have not yet taken a broad enough look at the options that may be available to us, and we have to do that so we know if we're doing the right thing with the plan that we're moving ahead with. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, fundamentally. I mean, it needs to fit into a sustainability vision for our region. Plain and simple. We have to do that.
So folks, keep that point in mind. Talk to your city councillors, talk to your CRD people, talk to your, when you see the information in the media, keep that in mind, that we have not yet taken the correct look at this, and ask yourself why the media isn't telling us this, because it's just not there. I'm surprised at what Vic has said, because I've tried to follow this issue, and really I thought we were, the best laid plans were being made, and I find out that no, we have not yet looked at what's possible. Thank you very much for watching. This has been Face to Face.